WWF Wrestlemania, featuring Hulk Hogan and other WWF superstars. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Sam.
Guys, welcome to WrestleMania.
Thank you.
I don't know why they welcome you to it, but that's like a thing, at least in the early years. I don't know if they still do it anymore, but like it would always be like a big thing, like, and welcome to WrestleMania. And it made me think of the podcast where it was like, and welcome to Nostalgia. So in a lot of ways, Nostalgia is like the WWF.
Do you think that they ripped us off with our intro?
Possible I ripped them off, actually, so we should probably drop it.
Okay.
Well, we
so
started
just
talking about games from 1985, and this game is 1989, so we came first.
Yeah.
But WrestleMania started in 1985. The first WrestleMania was in 1985.
Oh, that's right. We were all in that same. It was like the Pixar meeting. We decided we came up with Nostalgia and WrestleMania in the same.
Yeah,
meeting.
we can get rid of it. We could just start blurting out like nostalgia here, and then continue.
Yeah, I forgot that Vince McMahon was actually an original member of the Nostalgia podcast and then went on to just do the WWF instead. He kind of was like, see you later, guys.
That's
he did a
right,
Dave
yeah.
Mustaine on us.
He does.
Yeah, if you can get a hold of episode 0 of the podcast, he's still on.
But I do think that I'm the only one who really knows anything about 1989 and the WWF. Am I correct? Did you guys watch old wrestling? Like the wrestling before you were even born?
I didn't even watch wrestling after I was born.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a few episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, and that's pretty much all I know about the WWF /E/Z/whatever.
I watched when I was pretty young, but it still would have been like the mid-90s. But so it was like the Stone Cold era and stuff. So I know who some of these people are, but I never watched any of this old stuff.
Well, I would hope you know who Hulk Hogan is. WWF really wants you to know. It's featuring Hulk Hogan and then some other schmoes. It's
like Goldberg,
like Andre the Giant, the lovable star of Princess Bride.
Do you associate him with Princess Bride more than you would with wrestling? Out of curiosity, because you didn't watch wrestling, I'm just wondering.
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy. Because even if I saw him in Princess Bride, I'd think like, it's no different than in seeing the Big Show in Jingle All the Way. It's kind of like, of course that guy's a wrestler.
The Big Show.
Anyway, 1989 in wrestling. This would have been building up to WrestleMania 5. As I mentioned, the first WrestleMania was in 1985. And the Mega Powers, as they were known, Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Hulk Hogan, they ended a year-long friendship. And now the Mega Powers were finally going to explode at WrestleMania 5. However, that has very little to do with this game, because this game chose to do like a tournament mode as the main feature of the game. And that's an interesting take, because WrestleMania 4, the previous year, was the one that had a very long tournament. And I think critics mostly panned it, and I think even fans were like, wow, 4 hours of WrestleMania. Like, it was really long and just dragged on, and you watched a bunch of people fight each other. But it's notable because our boy, Macho Man Randy Savage, finally won his first WWF title, and I am a huge Macho Man fan. You better believe it.
I'd say that if I had to be a fan of a wrestler that I never really watched, it would probably be Macho Man Randy Savage.
Mine would be Andre the Giant.
But you wouldn't pick Andre the Giant if he endorsed Slim Jims. You would pick him because of the Princess Bride.
I have no relationship with Andre the Giant. I identify with Macho Man Randy Savage.
I pick Andre because I heard that in Princess Bride, he's French, and he didn't know any English, so he would just say all of his lines phonetically. And
I didn't know that.
That just sounds really funny to me.
I don't know who I would have picked, but it could have been Macho Man Randy Savage before I played this game. But I gotta say, I wasn't impressed with him in this game. It took him off my list of contenders.
He's got great moves from the top rope, though, Joe.
He didn't get any off on me.
Okay, that's true, too. And I'm sure we're all dying to talk about the gameplay here, but I feel like if this game was made for no other reason than the pause sound then this is Joe's shining moment to talk about the pause sound in this game, because as soon as I paused this game for the first time, I knew that we would have to talk about this, and I don't want to wait.
This is crazy. You're going to lead off with the pause sound. That's like
I have plenty to say about the pause
on top
sound.
of the dessert before eating the appetizer.
Well, actually, what I'm thinking now, I appreciate you teeing that up, because I am going to say a lot about the pause sound, and then I'm just going to sign off for the rest of the episode, so you guys can take care of the rest. I did notice the pause sound. It is the longest and most intricate pause sound we've had so far, to the point where you can pause the game and then unpause the game and continue playing the game, and the pause sound will still be playing from when you paused it. Maybe, I don't know, can we even play the pause sound here so people know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I will play it right now.
Wasn't that beautiful? Now, I even got to the point where I had I couldn't figure out how to pin anyone, so I had on my laptop, which was across the room, I had the instruction manual, and I would pause it, run over to the instruction manual, and as I'm still running over across the other side of the room, sitting down, reading the instruction manual, the pause sound's still playing across the room. So, notable.
So you had to go and check every time you wanted to pin somebody?
No, it was the one time I wanted to pin somebody.
Okay.
But it also doesn't sound like a pause sound. It actually sounds like something is starting, right? You don't think of it as like an interruption.
Right. Yeah. It feels like, I don't even know, is the game paused yet at first? I'm like, there's so much going on. It just sounds like I'm summoning something or something like that. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, Joe, you mentioned that you had a little trouble figuring out how to pin people. Do you feel like, and this goes to everyone, did you feel like you had a little trouble figuring out how to do much of anything in this game at the start of it, at least? I would say that, this game isn't impossible to play, but it certainly felt like it when I first got in the ring. I was almost just like, all right, so does Macho Man only attack sometimes? Like, does he not attack every time I press the button? I felt a little weird about things at first. Sean, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, things feel a little sticky. There's some lead up to the actual action that you perform before you press after you press the button to do it, which, I mean, makes sense. It's like, wrestling games usually have that extra weight added, kind of. But another thing that's weird about it is while you can walk around in like a form of 3D space in the ring, you only get to attack on like a flat plane. So I think that contributes to it too, of things either feeling like they're not connecting when they should. And it's sort of an issue that has cropped up in games like this before.
Yeah, that was my biggest qualm, was the fact that you can walk into Z space, but you can't do anything while facing that way. Like they made it possible so you can face both forward and backward, but you're useless until you're facing like horizontally towards your opponent, which feels like half the game is missing.
Yeah, I would get in a lot of situations also where I would be kind of stuck in a corner and someone would just bully me, because the second I move up to try and get out of the corner, it's not like you can attack that way. So I would just get punched back into the corner.
Yeah, it feels like sometimes you got to take the hit. You're like, all right, I'm just screwed here. Like, hit me so this way I can get out of where I am, and then I can try to attack you when I get back up.
And it's also possible to cheese that on the computer if you're playing somebody low enough on a totem pole. I remember in one of my matches, I just sort of did that to the guy to get him down to 0 energy. So, you can live and die by it.
But there are movesets in the game, and even if things rely on some kind of context, it is cool to see that only certain characters can go off the top rope, because that was not something everyone used to do. It used to be exclusively to technical wrestlers who were good at that stuff. That's why I mentioned Macho Man earlier on. He was a guy who went to the turnbuckle often, but then you have Bam Bam Bigelow able to do his cartwheel and be silly like that. So I think that's funny too, and it's nice that they included those things depending on the character. It's also like Hulk Hogan being the only one who can slam Andre the Giant. Like, that's neat. It first happened at WrestleMania 3, so it's even like a WrestleMania callback there. Although I'm pretty sure he also slammed Andre a few other times that in non-televised events, but they don't want you to know about that.
So this has the deep lore built into the gameplay, I see.
Exactly. There's a lot of... You can actually feel the tension more when you're playing as Hulk versus Andre because you just know so much more context. Or if you're playing Hulk versus Macho Man because it's like, that's the feud right there. So you feel it. When I play Hulk versus Honky Tonk Man, I'm just looking for the guitar power-up.
I've never heard of Honky Tonk Man.
But he was in there.
I know. But I'd heard of like the rest of them for the most part.
Honky Tonk Man was like an Elvis impersonator style thing, and each character in the game gets like these weird health power-ups. Honky Tonk Man just happens to look like a guitar. That's the power-up I was referring to. But then you have Hulk Hogan's, and that looks like a crucifix. Like, what is that about?
I thought it was like a sword, but yeah, in the manual it just looks like a cross.
I thought it was an X, just the letter X.
None of those things would make... It doesn't matter if it's a crucifix, a sword, or an X. I don't think of any of those things for Hulk. I would think, like, get an American flag or something like that. The guy was a real American.
Or, like, mustache wax.
Yeah, mustache wax is good, too.
Yeah.
Right? Or,
ripped
get
shirt.
Mr. T. Mr. T could be his power-up.
Well, then they'd have to get the rights for Mr. T's likeness.
Well, they wrestled together in WrestleMania 1, so I'm just trying to do as many throwbacks to the previous WrestleManias before 5.
Or maybe it could be like the title card for the reality show he'd have later in life.
Yeah, that's true too. What was that reality show called? I can't remember now, but it got him in a lot of trouble.
I don't remember.
Oh yeah.
That show really killed him for the most part. Actually, it was not many good things came out of that show. But where is anything else in this game? Where are the crowds? Where's the atmosphere? Where's like the announcers at the announcers table? Maybe some introductions as they enter the ring, because that's like a big deal. Where are these things?
I will say, I think that the crowd missing is definitely very strange. The other stuff, it's like, okay, maybe they couldn't, they didn't. It's a lot to add that stuff in, but they're not even a crowd. They're just in a black void. I feel like that's just a texture you can lay behind it. So it's a little strange. Since
we're still in the pandemic, I just want to say that like wrestling in WWF Wrestlemania on the NES is very similar to what wrestling looks like right now on TV. Because there's no crowd. It's just silent. It's crazy, but like they shouldn't. I bet they weren't thinking like, oh, how are we going to solve this whole like no crowd thing during the pandemic? Oh, well, I once played WWF Wrestlemania, and people seemed to like that game back then, so we can just simulate that, but in real life.
This is off topic of the game, but I think what would have been cool for Plague Wrestling would be if they just like superimposed the canned animations of like 3D models from the games like just into the stands. I think that would have been a really interesting way to view wrestling.
Or they could have shot the whole thing like a movie. Like every fight is actually just like pre-shot and looks like a movie. A bad movie, but it would look like one, So this way you don't have to do the whole live thing and worry about that. And the reason I bring that up is not just to talk about regular wrestling, but what if I told you that there was another game that came out this same year on DOS computers where you could fight as Hulk Hogan and Macho Man and such, but instead of actually like going around in the ring and controlling your character and, choosing their attacks and everything like that, instead you pick from a list of attacks, and then it shows you like an image based on an actual like photograph of the WWF. Like it shows you an image of the result based on like the computer determining how like whether or not your move was successful. So like a storybook mode.
So this is sort of like an even lower, like a lower interaction version of like the NES Pro Wrestling, or
exactly a choose your own adventure.
That's
style
what I was gonna
wrestling,
say. Yeah,
where all you get is these like text fields that say I'm gonna throw a punch or I'm gonna climb the top rope, and then the game calculates like the probability of that working out for you, and then shows an image based on the result. Not even like a video file.
D&D, yeah, D&D wrestling. I kind of dig it.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think that it's like it's novel enough that it's like its own thing without trying to be a recreation of something else.
It's just interesting because they both came out in the same year. That's why I'm calling it out, because I actually think I'd prefer, in this case, just being into like actual video games. I prefer this WWF Wrestlemania NES take here because I do like the idea of like I am Hulk Hogan rather than like I'm Hulk Hogan's manager calling the shots from the corner and then seeing if he does them or not.
I feel like they both kind of have their own. They both have their own like. They would both have their own fan base. You know, there's a different. This is like almost totally different styles of games.
Yeah. But now that you mention the managers, like they're all listed like in the game and in the manual. Like, why don't we get to see the managers on the sides too? And that you're missing a lot of flavor, like in addition to crowds and that basic stuff.
Yeah. And like you said with the managers, like even just the intros, like just having them come out with their manager or something would have been nice. They didn't forget everything though, because there is theme music for each character that I feel like either spawns when one of the theme music runs out, or if you pause the game, it automatically changes to the next track when you unpause. But those themes are pretty good.
Yeah, I liked them. I didn't realize that there was any logic to it. It just kind of kept switching at random. Maybe it has to do with like who's got more energy or something. I'm not sure, but I didn't know that they were personalized.
And were you surprised when you found out that Macho Man's theme song was Pomp and Circumstance?
No, I remember it being kind of weird. But I played as him for like the amount of time I played the game, so I heard it a lot.
Yeah, and I remember this story of this kid who was graduating high school, and they started playing Pomp and Circumstance, and he didn't know that was the graduation song, and he was like, holy shit, Macho Man is here? At my graduation?
That's funny.
Anyway, back to the game. Not that, having a robust selection of wrestlers is a big deal, but I do think it's nice that they didn't just make it 2 or even just 4 characters. Like, if they're going to make it a tournament mode, they at least gave you 8 characters to choose from. And I feel like they all are different enough, both in personalities from their actual sport, but also, like, in the game as well, that you can pick different people. I know Sean and I mostly played as Macho Man just because why wouldn't you pick Macho Man if the option's available to you? However, like, it is a different experience playing as different characters. I think that needs to be mentioned. It's not like everybody has the same punch. Everybody does the same thing when they're running off the ropes and stuff like that. So I think that's nice. What'd you guys think of that?
Yeah, on one level, I was pretty impressed with how they. I mean, as someone who doesn't really know these people very well, it seems like they put a lot of thought into making them feel like who they are. You're making them seem like, giving them, like you said about the cartwheel before and things like all their different moves kind of feeling like those, their style. But on the other hand, I do think that sometimes maybe they went a little overboard with like sometimes even just to pin is different combination of buttons apparently, which maybe is why I was having trouble. I found that the way that you pin in the manual is just wrong anyways. I was doing it a different way, but why should doing the same move take different buttons for different characters? So like there were pros and cons to me.
Yeah, I would say that I liked that there was more than just like palette swaps here, like we may have seen in previous games. Like the closest that I can think of to the system that we're seeing here, I don't know if it was ice hockey or if it was another one that we played around the same time, another hockey game where you could make your team filled with like 3 different archetypes of players.
That's ice hockey.
Okay, that was ice hockey. And I just like that there was a different feel to each character. Like if you're playing as Andre the Giant, and I did do a match with him just to say that I didn't just play as Macho Man Randy Savage. And he's a little slower, but he's also got like much more reach. It feels like a different game, like let alone the different moveset. It is odd that pin is different. Like that seems like it should have been a universal input, but I liked it more than I disliked it.
Yeah, it seems like the only reason why pin is a different moveset is because certain characters have potentially more moves than others or aren't applicable. Like I think Bam Bam Bigelow can't body slam so he doesn't have an A plus B button, but he has like an A plus B button if you have your back to the opponent. So like, again, that whole like being contextual to what you're doing thing seems nice on paper because there's only an A and a B button and some directional pads. So like, you kind of do need to figure out how to do this. And we've all agreed now that grabbing the going into the grapple against an enemy and then having a menu pop up with possible moves that you'd like to make is not what we want to see. And that was in tag team wrestling early in 1986. You can check out that episode for our thoughts on a much more jank wrestling game. However, here, it's just, I feel like right now, this is actually convincing me that we just might not see a good wrestling game on the NES. And that's not because I think WWF would have figured it out on the first bout, but I'm just thinking about like the possible combinations that you could do with just 2 buttons and a bunch of directions. And a lot of it is going to rely on this context-based stuff that just, you know, every now and again is just going to get you in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say that I appreciate... I think this is the best feeling wrestling game that we've played so far. I would say that is a low bar to clear. But it is slowly... I mean, I don't think they'll ever get there, but they are slowly fixing all of the faults that we see in these games.
I wonder if they could take, for a future game, almost like a Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat kind of approach, where like the input directions on the D-pad determine the moves, and that's like a way you can get other moves in there, but I don't know how jank that would be.
I think the only reason why they haven't opted to do that yet is, one, those games haven't come out yet, and they're the ones that like make that whole idea even possible. Like, I don't think games were doing that before those fighting games came out. But also, you know, you have a sense of 3D movement in the ring. If you made this a strict 2D fighter, it wouldn't quite feel like a wrestling game. It would just be more like an Urban Champion style game for the NES, you know?
Mm-hmm. In that case, like, for me, I feel like the more arcadey a sports game feels on a retro console, the better it'll play. And the fact that they're going for realism with this game, I feel like I agree with you. I don't know if the controls could get tighter.
But, you know, I'm glad you mentioned Street Fighter and those kind of games, because in a way, this really is a fighting game, right? Like, we joked about way back in Trojan, our first episode for 1987, or maybe it was our second episode, I don't remember. Anyway, we joked about how that has a fighting game mode, and those guys would go on to create Street Fighter, so that's pretty interesting. But here, you know, you've got an energy meter, you've got your ability to do different moves based on the context of situations. So I actually think, like, this isn't like that far off from the idea of what fighting games would eventually become. It's not there, but it's also interesting to see these proto, you know, fighting. What do you call those fighting games? Like, is that what you call them? Fighting games? It seems kind of weird.
Yeah,
it feels wrong to me.
MLG.
MLG. Feels weird to just call Street Fighter a fighting game, though, right? Like, it's got to be something.
A 2D fighting game.
There you go. Sure. Why not?
I
just
think
feels strange that shmups have like a cool category and Street Fighter doesn't have like a shmup-like word for it.
I do think that a big reason that it feels like it's getting closer to fighting games that we know and stuff is what we already talked about, is that that you have to learn your character. That's something we didn't really have so much before. And maybe a little bit, but like, this is the pros and cons aside, like, it is, you do have to like learn your character, to learn that character's moves, and like, you get good with one character. And I think that makes it feel a lot closer to like what we're more familiar with.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't really think about it that way. That like, some of the depth and the replayability of a game like this, it like just boils down to like who you select, and I appreciate that. It sort of brings us to a more modern view of these kinds of games. Again, because I keep thinking about games in the past basically just being palette swaps. So while it's a weird execution, I still view it positively.
So did anyone actually wind up becoming the WWF Heavyweight Champion and beating the tournament mode and fighting every other character?
I got like 3 or 4 guys in. At that point, it just seemed even harder to land a hit. Like, DiBiase was a chump, but everything beyond that, it got exponentially harder for me.
It was on that road for me, and then I actually lost a couple times to Honky Tonk Man, and then because he had gotten harder. So then after Honky Tonk Man, when I finally beat him, I got to Randy Savage, and I thought, okay, well now I'm definitely done because it's just going to get harder. And he was like a cakewalk. And then I lost on Andre the Giant, so no, I also didn't win. But
I did not do well in this game. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. You know what's funny is like we joked about how Hulk gets all the attention and stuff like that, and you got to remember Hulkamania was a real thing in the late 80s and even early 90s. The guy was more than just the WWF. He was in movies. He was just a big celeb in general, and so it makes sense that they would call him out on the back of the box rather than any other character. But it also feels like they kind of made him. I don't want to say like the Mike Tyson version of this game, but they definitely made him the best character in the game and the hardest one to beat personally. So like playing as him was a huge advantage, but also going against him just seemed like it was a really tough fight. I don't know if you guys felt like they gave him a better moveset or just made him more powerful. I don't know what it was about him. He just felt hard to beat.
I didn't ever get to him, so unfortunately, while I played as him for a little bit, I did not even face the computer as Hulk.
I
only
faced Hulk as the single player mode. I think in tournament he's actually probably is saved for last if I think about it.
He is, yeah, because I couldn't get to him.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I just faced him. I just selected him outside of a tournament just to see what it was like, and I lost. But I don't know if that means he was harder or I'm just bad. I also had a hard time. I feel like him and Andre the Giant were both very difficult. I mean, they were all difficult, don't get me wrong, but those two seemed like they were elevated.
And just as a side note about our boy Macho Man, I just didn't appreciate how in the manual they kept calling him Randy Macho Man Savage. It really doesn't have the same cadence. It felt kind of disrespectful. Maybe they called him that in the 80s, but I've only known him as Macho Man Randy Savage. Can you clarify, Mike?
They were definitely calling him Macho Man Randy Savage. So that is weird, and something that maybe my eyes corrected while I was reading the manual. Maybe I just chose to, because, you know, and now that I'm looking at the manual, since you brought it up, I brought up my own, and it is weird to see Randy Macho Man Savage there. It's also, like, there's Ted $1 Million Man DiBiase, and I don't think that's right either. I think it was Ted DiBiase the $1 Million Man. Not like $1 Million Man is like his nickname. It's like he is the $1 Million Man.
I see. So they're just chumps.
Yeah. I don't know what this is about, but you know, this is another one of those games that was made by Rare. So you know, questionable output from them after a hot start on the system. They went from Slalom and
great game.
Yeah. What's questionable?
What was that other
Slalom?
game? Wizards and Warriors? Did they make Wizards and Warriors? I feel like they did. I'll say they did, and then I'll edit it out if I'm wrong. But they made those games, and now all of a sudden it's like it's okay to start making some garbage too. Not that this is garbage. I'm just saying, like, for Rare's quality of stuff, this is a step down. Let's be real.
Yeah.
There's no big butts in this game like Slalom.
Right.
I don't remember the big butts in Slalom. Did we make
Oh,
a big
it
joke
was.
of that?
I don't know how you could miss it. It was.
Yeah, it's right in your face.
Yeah,
actually.
it's like the center point, the focal point of the screen.
That's why the game was essential for
All right.
Well, we got a few more WWF games to go on the NES. I don't know the titles of all of them off the top of my head, but I do know that the very next one is going to be a WrestleMania game again. It is WWF Wrestlemania Challenge, And if I had to guess, it's probably made by Rare as well. Hope to be wrong, but I'd like to see each third-party developer get a stab at making a WWF game. What do you got, Konami? Capcom, what do you bring in to the WWF genre? I'd love to see it. LJN, you too. Why not? We're probably not going to get that many, but I think we get at least 4 of these guys. On the NES.
Give me a Data East one.
No. Give me a Jaleco version.
I want to see how Data East says Randy Savage's name.
That's the test. Everybody gets the Macho Man Randy Savage test.
You
I
get
want to
his
see a
name
Will
in,
Wright version.
Oh, that would be
Ooh.
interesting. Like you're a manager in that game, and you have to try to like sign your wrestler through like, you know, first you're in like the Northeast Regional Division, and you got to build yourself up to the WWF.
and then they start getting concussions, and you have to be like, all right, which one? Like, how much can I push you before you're gonna sue me?
Oh, I like that. You're managing a bunch of different wrestlers too. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. It's like it's a wrestling manager simulator.
I would play that game for 100%.
Absolutely. Any game with concussions, really. That's why we play Madden every year.
Yeah.
I thought a Will Wright version would be more like you create like a prototype version of the sport of wrestling, and then you let it like evolve over time into what we know as wrestling today.
Like Spore?
Yeah.
It feels more like a post-show thing, but like someone has to explain to me the origins of staged wrestling in general. Like, how did it just become a thing that there are now like worldwide leagues for this, and it's just globally accepted that nobody actually wrestles anybody for real? It's just bizarre. But it must have started in like
not to
Yeah,
get
go ahead,
into
go for
it,
it.
but I mean, isn't it like a circus thing?
Yes, it is, but I just meant like for how long? Like did the Greeks do this even way back when? Like did they have their own form of staged fighting that wasn't necessarily wrestling we know today but was still like a thing? Was the Colosseum staged? Did those lions really eat those guys?
Something tells me yes. But
Okay, that's fair.
That wasn't Frank DiBiase. I just like to say his name.
Right, and I didn't mean any disrespect to any people whose like great grandparents were eaten by lions. I just meant like maybe it didn't happen.
I mean, you know, they wouldn't be here if that happened.
That's true. Quick shout out to WWF Wrestlemania 2000, a WWF Wrestlemania game I really like, and that's on the N64. And also, if we're talking about N64 wrestling games, you might as well bring up WWF No Mercy, where you have to say dig diggity dog. That's just something everybody has to say when they bring up WWF No Mercy. You'll know what I'm talking about if you're a real one. Also, Joe, I think you wanted to talk about WWF SmackDown on the PlayStation 1?
Well, I mentioned it. Did I mention it last week on the episode?
I think so.
That was the first WWF game that I played, and that was when I was sort of into WWF at the time. And that game, as far as I remember, was pretty great. I'm sure if I played it now, I'd find all kinds of flaws with it. But I was hoping that this game would feel a little more like that. Obviously, with with limited expectations.
Right, but that one actually had like a story mode that could go on for like multiple years. Like that, you know, this game definitely needs more than a tournament mode. It would be cool if you built up to WrestleMania, not just singular fights.
Right, but also on that note too, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't able to play anyone multiplayer. I think that this is another game. I don't think it would turn anything around or like be like a significantly like better game in multiplayer. But I feel like this is a game that is probably at least more fun in multiplayer. Like it's not necessarily fun to go against the computer, or as fun to go against the computer than it is to actually compete with someone else in any kind of wrestling game like this. And that's what that old game kind of invoked for me, and what I was hoping to get here.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would have gotten very frustrated at playing this game with any of you, because you'd be landing attacks on me that I feel like shouldn't register, and I'd be cursing the whole time.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be winning any World Heavyweight Championships against real people. My only shot here was against the computers, and I couldn't even do that. So I don't win the belt, but maybe this game will get the championship belt in a little thing we like to call the Essential Games List. In this corner, Sean, the Revolution, give us your Essential Games List vote.
This game is I mean, it's not as jank as past wrestling games, but it's 100% a jank game. I think that there's a lot of great steps forward in presentation, especially considering these are actually like real wrestlers with kind of they have things about the gameplay that you play as them that are somewhat based off of the wrestler themselves. So I thought that was cool. But playing the game it's very frustrating. They don't have this down yet, so it is not essential.
All right, you heard it first from the Revolution himself.
Yeah.
Sam, would you like to vote?
Yes.
It's just Sam.
It's just Sam. That's my name. And in this corner, Sam.
Well, you usually do a big, like, you know, in our best of 88 episode, you had a big, like, number 10. Like, you usually do your own hyping, so I felt like,
Oh, yeah.
just Sam, you could turn that into something. You could be like, yeah, I'm Sam, and I'm here to tell you, man, like...
Yeah. It's not essential.
That's really all you have to say. That's really
no,
it.
I'm just kidding. It's not essential, but it's the best of the wrestling games that we've played so far. I like that each of the characters is like their own character and they feel different. It's not just a palette swap like we've mentioned before, but there's still a lot there's a lot lacking in this game. And that's what I have to say about that.
All right,
brother.
And now, yeah, brother, that's what I'm talking about, man. Joe, just Joe, just a guy named Joe. That could be.
Wait,
I'm
that's
the
my
only
thing.
one. I'm the only one with a nickname. Come on.
No, but I think just a guy named Joe is actually interesting because that's like there's a Spider-Man comic early on where like they just said just a guy named Joe, and I never quite understood that. I was like, is Spider-Man the guy who's just a guy named Joe? And as though like his name's Peter Parker, so why would you put that on the cover? Anyway, interesting tangent there. But
Joe's name should be
Joe.
Spider-Man.
Right. Oh, Joe's name could be Spider-Man, and Spider-Man's name could be just a guy named Joe.
Yeah, or
Okay,
Spider-Man.
You're blowing my
You share
secret
it.
here that I'm Spider-Man.
Oh, whoops. Well, you also fought Macho Man then in Spider-Man 1, the movie.
That's right. Was that Macho Man?
That was Macho Man.
I forgot about that. That's right.
Yep. Bonesaw is
so
always
perfect.
ready.
So we weren't off track at all. But here's my essential games thoughts on this game. So before I played this, I had actually seen some reviews on this just in the past, and they were really, really bad. And I'm not saying that that review was not deserved, but I will say that colored my opinion in a way that this game surprised me, and it was not as bad as I thought it was. Especially because I was also thinking of other similar games we've played on the NES so far. And I do think that there's a level of charm, and I do think that there's a good amount of, I don't know, there's a good amount of like fan appreciation or a good amount of like attention to detail that like if you were a fan in the 80s, you'd probably, and you're a kid and you haven't experienced other games better than this, you'd probably like this game quite a bit. But that being said, it's a very flawed game, especially just with the way it controls where you can't fight facing forward or facing backwards, and it's a little simplified, and sometimes it feels like your inputs aren't working. It's definitely not essential. I would say I would probably only actually give it a play it if you're into wrestling games anyways and you're interested in this, but there are definitely plenty of better options out there. So no, not essential.
All right, so there's no chance of it being on the essential games list, but I will throw out there that I don't think this is the best wrestling game we've had on the NES so far. I do think Pro Wrestling, which was actually made by Nintendo, is the best and the standard to go off of. And as you know from last episode, I think I said my rules are that if a game in a genre already is like better than it, but that one's not on the list, why should this one be? And that still holds true here. It's a wrestling game that includes some fan service, but it missed a lot of stuff that we talked about early on. Where the heck is the crowd, the atmosphere, the introductions, the announcers? This stuff needs to be in there, especially if you're trying to match the presentational format of a WrestleMania. You can't call your game WrestleMania where you're talking about crowds of like 93,000. That was all made up too, but at least they could have made up the crowds here and pretended like there were 93,000 people in attendance rather than just lie to the public. However, that's not here, you know? There's really nothing else here other than the characters that, you know, I feel like are a good representation. I'm a little surprised there's no Ricky the Dragon or Ultimate Warrior in this game, but we'll take what we can get, and I think this is a good start. And I'm not going to dismiss future WWF NES games. That said, I know Joe mentioned that people are tough on these games, perhaps a little too tough. You know, it takes some learning, but you can get there. However, if we're looking at the essential games list as games you should go back and play today, I'm saying that if you want to fight with these same set of awesome wrestlers in your roster, allow me to recommend Legends of WrestleMania on like the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, where all the presentational stuff of WrestleMania is there, plus the ability to play as guys like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and yes, even Ultimate Warrior. So, Legends of WrestleMania is the game I would recommend. I'm not saying that's going on the NES Essential Games list, but it would be on some kind of Essential Games list.
Here
in a
Comes the
different
Pain.
universe.
You know, that's a good one, right?
It's an okay game. Legends of WrestleMania embraced like the old campiness of the WWF and WrestleMania in general and stuff like that, and really like fit into everything. So I'm saying if you're looking for like a WrestleMania game, Legends of WrestleMania is my pick, and a game that would be more likely, but more likely to be on my essential games list than whatever WWF Wrestlemania poses itself to be on the NES. So for that reason, it will not be joining the essential games list. But not many games get a chance for that anyway. In 1988 is proving rough for essential games list. Sesame Street 1, 2, 3 came close.
89.
However, some bad menu... Oh, 1989, that's right. Sesame Street 1, 2, 3 came close, but some bad NES games, will be found as we continue to go through. A couple of people wrote into us and were like, hey, just so you know, games get worse as the years go on. And I'm like, don't threaten me with a bad time.
A good time.
No, a bad time. They're threatening me with a bad time. Oh,
yes, they are.
But you're right. That's the usual saying is don't threaten me with a good time. Another thing we should probably mention is that we're trying to plan a little game jam, nostalgia style. If you're not familiar with what a game jam is, it's, we'll probably throw a link in the show notes to the actual website and everything like that, or some details that we have. And we'll be talking about it on Twitter, too, to build up to it. But essentially, we're going to try and host something where people who are familiar with creating games can try to make some NES-style games of their own, and we will play them on a special episode. I know Sam... this very same Sam, just Sam. Yeah, that Sam is going to be making a game. So if he can make a game, why can't you? What's your excuse?
Yeah,
Sam, do you want to talk a little bit more about this game jam?
Go for it, Sam.
I think you just about got it. But for anyone who's not familiar with game jams, it's kind of like a boot camp where you have a limited amount of time to make a game. And for this one specifically, we're asking that your games are like themed after the NES. So whether if it's some kind of mechanic from an NES game that you like, or just something that you think would be cool to play on the NES, we're asking that it's like the NES style graphics. So I think that's 256 by 240 for resolution size. And audio that doesn't have to be exactly NES, but sounds like NES audio.
Let's get the aesthetic.
Yeah, just to try and fit the aesthetic of an NES, so it shouldn't be like anything crazy in 3D or anything like that. Like pixel art. It should be pixel art, I mean. And that's it. And I just hope that people join and have fun.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. We'll be running it from March 19th to the 28th. And if you can't make games, don't worry, because you'll also get a chance to play these games. You don't just have to hear about them from us. But if you can make games, that means now your audience is going to be larger than just 4 people. It's going to be every listener of Nostalgia as well. And believe me, there are tens of us. That said, we'll continue to talk about this on Twitter at NostalgiaCast if you don't know, and don't expect this game jam to be the last fun thing we do. We're doing fun things all the time. Last week a couple weeks ago, I just did a simulation of Tecmo Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that was dead wrong. It got it wrong so many times that it hurt. In fact, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers never won a game in the simulations, but then went on to destroy the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Something that, I'm not sure. Sean, Bills fans, how they feeling about that?
I want to see Tom Brady stop. But I just had one little note about the Game Jam, because as one would expect, we will be the judges, and so if for any reason you think you want to stroke the ego of one or a few of us within the game by making maybe you'll just say how right we are about games, like with a character in yours or something like that. Feel free. There's no rules against something like that.
That makes me wonder, Sam, would it be cheating if they made just a game based on the Essential Games list where you can walk through like a museum of the Essential Games list and then just play those actual like pirated versions of those games?
If they can figure out how to code it, they can do whatever they want. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily legal, but we're not selling it, so there's no harm.
Yeah.
We're not selling it, so there's no harm. We're not really selling anything on this podcast, and that's why the episodes are run as long as we want. Nobody can tell us to stop. Nobody produces the nostalgia people, and that could be a problem. To certain listeners, I bet. They're probably like, wow, this episode should have ended 2 minutes ago. And to that I say, it's ending right now, and you can't stop us either. So join us next week for Bandai Golf Challenge Pebble Beach. A little strange because the colons come between golf and challenge, but not Pebble Beach. So it sounds like you're challenging Pebble Beach to a game of Bandai Golf.
I mean, it's hard to think that way, Mike.
Right. I understand.
It's the same guy who wrote.
Think they're challenging a golf course.
It's the same guy who wrote Macho Man or Randy Savage Macho Man or whatever into the manual of this game.
Yeah.
The guy who writes these manuals really got a lot of freelance work back in the day.
Yeah, he wrote all of them.
Yep. Anyway, I'm Michael Esposito. You can always find Nostalgia at NostalgiaCast on Twitter. Look forward to the Game Jam. We'll be running it from March 19th to the 28th. And you can find me at Esposito Film on Twitter, and I'll be talking to you real soon.